Okay, it looks like we are officially live. Beautiful. Well, hello everybody. Joshua Hatton here with ImpEx Beverages, and I want to welcome you all back to our, I guess, our second season of the ImpEx Beverages Distillery Deep Dive series. Hopefully, you had a chance to join us 2 weeks ago, where we focused on our single malt Scotch whiskey brands. Today we've got some amazing guests that I'll be introducing shortly. But before I introduce them, I want to remind everybody as you're signing on and you're pouring hopefully some nice rum into your glass or some nice gin into your glass. And hey, if you don't have rum or gin, I imagine you may have a whiskey or two, or even a beer, whatever. Pour a little something and hang out with us. I'll be introducing our guests in a moment, but I wanted to let you know before I introduce them, the events that will be happening after this. So in 2 weeks, on Wednesday, May 5th, we'll be going over our world malt whiskey brands, where we'll be highlighting Penderyn and Milk and Honey Distillery, or M&H, Godin Carolus and Matsui. And we'll actually have some guests there. We just confirmed the Cask Chasers to be our special guests there. So we're really excited to have them. Wednesday, May 19, we will be focusing on our whiskeys from Japan, or Japanese whiskeys. And we'll be looking at Kurayoshi, Oishi, Fukano, Totori, and maybe another treat or two. And then finally, on Wednesday, June 2nd, we will be focusing on independent bottlers. And the brands in question there will be Single Malts of Scotland, Single Cask Nation, and a couple of other treats as well that I don't want to divulge just yet. Because what I want to do is I want to introduce our guests. I'm really excited to have these people here. So first, let me bring my co-hosts on. We've got the inimitable Sam Filmus with us, the managing director of ImpEx. How you doing, Sam?
Pretty good, Joshua. Pretty good. How are you?
Good. I'm good. I'm good. I'm more awake than some of our guests that I'll be introducing shortly. There's no doubt about that, especially Tal in Israel, where I think it's like next week sometime in Israel right now. And then, of course, Chris Udy. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. Hello, everyone.
So let me see. I'm not going to do this in any particular order. You know what? Look at this. I'll bring on the good Ken Rose from Rum and Cane Merchants. How you doing today, Ken?
Yeah, hi, good morning. Very well, thanks, Josh. Great to see you.
Likewise, and you're calling in from the Czech Republic, so you're what, 6 hours ahead of New York time, I guess?
It's at 2:30 a.m. here. That's right.
Sweet fancy Moses. Well, let's get even later. Let's look at 3:30 a.m. Let's look at Tal Hotner from M&H Distillery. How are you, sir?
I'm waking up, another coffee. So I'm great. I'm great to see you guys.
Like I love that you continually try to pass off Guinness as coffee. It's admirable. It's admirable.
You know me too good.
And then let's rewind the clock a little bit here, and we'll bring on Hamish Martin, Herb Garden Gin, aka Secret Garden Gin, out of Scotland. How are you today?
I'm good. Yeah, it's 1:30 in the morning, and as Scotland would be, it's pretty cold. So if you think I see everybody in t-shirts there. I've got about 4 layers on. I'm in the distillery and the botanical dry room, so it's chilly in here.
Oh wow! Well, I hope we'll have a chance to maybe look at a bit of the drying room. That would be pretty cool to see. I remember seeing that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll show you some of the. I'll do that.
Beautiful. And then the wonderful Mitch Wilson with Black Tot Rum. Hello, sir.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm well. It's been too long. What, a good 10 hours since I've seen you last?
at least. You guys have got me working around the clock. But I like that you've got people later in the time zones this time to me. I feel like you're proving a point. Like, I've got the early shift tonight. Only one.
You got the early shift. Yeah. Keeping people awake at all hours.
I've got my popcorn ready for tonight, as promised. So I'm just going to be enjoying.
Beautiful. And then finally, our special guests. We've got Aaron, Mike, and Gilo from It's Just the Booze Dancing. How are you, gents?
Doing good.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Good evening or good morning, depending on where you are.
I'm just stuck in the middle.
Aaron's the one lucky guy. Well, Aaron, Sam, and Chris. It's dinner time. It's 5:30 for you guys. So I want to start us off with an opening question, but I don't think I can properly kick off my opening question without pointing a question at Sam Filmus first. So I hope you'll allow this. Sam, ImpEx Beverages started in 2008, if memory serves. Am I correct on that? Oh, you're mute, Sam.
I am, and I think my connection is not too well. Can you repeat it, please, Joshua?
Yeah, so ImpEx Beverages started in 2008, correct?
Correct, 2008.
And from 2008 until very, very recently, we've been an importer of whiskeys, and really nothing but whiskeys. Things have kind of changed. Now we have rum in our portfolio. Now we have gin in our portfolio, and multiple rums and multiple gins. And now we have this product that I'm hoping Chris will talk about a little later. Now we have Japanese umeshus. And so as a person who started a whiskey import company, why all of a sudden are you now bringing gin and rum and umeshu and few other things? What's the impetus there?
Well, Joshua, this is not the question I asked you to ask me, but that's okay.
He's gone rogue.
On a serious note, you're right. We started this company as a Scotch whiskey importer, and we started actually with a blended Scotch whiskey called Isle of Skye, and then we brought some single malts and on and on and on. And I was walking into the liquor store, and I see a huge, shelf with Scotch whiskeys. And all of a sudden, I see bourbons are pushing it from this side, and then world whiskey is pushing from that side. So I said, we need to do something about that. So went to world whiskey. I was against gin for a long time. I was like, oh, everyone's saying gin is the next thing. Next year it's going to be gin. Next year it's going to be rum, gin, rum. But I need to confess, it probably started at the same time with the difference in one day between Old Curiosity Distillery and M&H Distillery, both producing gins. And I will probably feel guilty for the rest of my life, Tal, that I said no to gin. And, Joshua says, they have a greater single malts. And I said, well, if they really trust in us, they will go with us. If not, sorry about that. So they did trust in us, and they decided to go with their whiskey only before I tasted their gin. Same thing with Old Curiosity or Herb Gin or Garden Gin. Roderick McKenzie, who is a very respected person in the industry, got a hold of me one day. He used to work in McLeod's, and said, Sam, I've got something for you. And I said, what is this, Roderick? He goes, gin. I said, no, Roderick, let's talk about weather in Scotland. Let's talk about anything but not gin. He goes, Sam, trust me on this. So we happened to have all our team, ImpEx team, visiting Scotland a couple of years ago, and we met Tal and his team. That was almost looked like Mossad, because there were 6 or 7 of them. So I thought, if I don't get the pomegranate, then I'll see Brian devoted hanging himself up or killing me. And then I decided to have another look at the gin, but also visiting the Old Curiosity Distillery and meeting Hamish. And man, this guy is the brand himself. Not forget about Herb Garden Gin. The personality of this person who is a father of 5, but I think every flower that grows there, it's his kid. You could see him taking off shoes and walking along these flowers and singing for them and putting the music. It just totally blew me away. And then I tasted it, and that's where I think I discovered. Being in the industry for 20 years, I discovered the gin is something that I need to consider. So here we go. And then Chris, knowing that I'm busy, he asked me, and he said, I said yes. All of a sudden, I see all these Japanese gins being on my table. So you tricked me there, Paul. So Joshua tricked me with Levantine gin for sure. Roderick Mackenzie with Herb Garden gin, and then Chris, thank you, partner, with Japanese whiskey gin. Sorry. So that's the story.
Well, it's, as someone who's a rum fan and a gin fan. Granted, I'll always be a bit more of a whiskey fan than anything, but as someone who's a fan of artisanal rums and gins, I think it's really important for the American consumer to see this, and so this leads me into my question, and I'm going to focus on this word artisanal, right? When most people think of rum and gin, it's with the idea that you're going to go to a bar and you say to the bartender, "Give me a rum and coke, give me a gin and tonic, make me a Negroni, make whatever it is." And what you're doing is you're taking a spirit and you're blending it into a cocktail that may be delicious and may not be delicious, but it's going into a cocktail, and not really thought of as a serious drink. When in many cases, I think it could and should be thought of as a serious drink. And actually, Mitch, I'm gonna do a little shout out to you. I was flicking through Instagram and I saw you had done this little video talking about how you should sip spirits, right? Sip it 3 times, and you ended it off with saying, "Give the rum a go. Maybe it's good by itself, just sipping. It'll likely be good in a cocktail, but it could be really good by itself." And so I had this question in my mind. Then I saw that and I said, okay, I have to ask this question. And so my question is, with more people discovering authentic rums, real rums, and artisanal gins, gins to the point where right now I have some Herb Garden gin in my glass and I'm just drinking it straight because it's delicious. And you can do that. It doesn't need to be blended into something. It could be drunk as it is, or it can be blended into something. My question to you is, do you feel, how do you see the education of the consumer on these products? Do we need to be focusing more on how natural rums could be gorgeous, how true artisanal gins could be wonderful in and of themselves, but also both categories kind of living comfortably in the cocktail world as well? And if yes, we need education, to what point, how do we get there? Or maybe we don't need education. Maybe I'm just maybe I'm completely overthinking this and I should just calm down and not compare everything to how serious whiskey should be or how serious wine should be. And so, again, I'm going to, if you don't mind, Mitch, I'm going to pick on you. What are your thoughts here, specifically with rum? Because as you were saying earlier today, it's this category that it's not very transparent. There could be some funny stuff happening, but if you really zoom in, you can find some magical stuff there, and you can start educating people on a proper and lovely category.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, I think we're battling with different things here, because obviously within the rum world, and those of us who work in the rum world, I know we've got Ken from Rum K Merchants here as well, who has an incredible range. And you know, the people who know their rum, who've got into their rum, know how much amazing stuff there is to drink and to choose from. And to those people, we're kind of preaching to the choir almost. But every spirit, every category, I think, has a preconception coming into it. Even if you've never really drunk it before, even if you've never ordered it at a bar, everyone has a preconception of what that spirit is. So like for whiskey, it might be the old guy drinking whiskey on the rocks in an armchair or something by a fireplace, you know, and that's the whiskey misconception, right? That whiskey itself is trying to shake off and make it more, you know, fresh and young and appealing to younger generations, all this kind of stuff. You have the guys in France with cognac who are like, well, we don't want to drink cognac because that's what our grandparents drank, you know, and cognac's, you know, maybe lost its cool in that place, but then in other places it's really great, you know. Misconceptions of gin, you know, we still talk about, you know, gin lane and you know, people crying and getting upset because it's gin, you know. And rum, we think about rum and cokes and pina coladas and cocktail and that's as far as that goes. And all of these preconceptions, they can be helpful or they can be hurtful to the category, and they can be a way in, and they can be a point which gets someone interested. Like someone might see that image of someone drinking whiskey in their armchair and think, wow, I really want to be more distinguished, I'm going to drink whiskey, you know, and they lean into that idea. Or they can see something in that spirit and go, I don't want to be like that, I'm never going to drink that thing, you know, and move away from it completely. So I think we're all battling with different things depending on what the category is, you know, and I think we often look at whiskey from the rum category going, okay, we want to be like that. We want to have more clearer regulations. We want to have better education. We want to have hordes of whiskey fans become rum fans and go, oh, I know the difference between this distillery 5 minutes away from this distillery and the four different distilleries on this island and why they're that way. We're not there yet. You know, we have a very small niche group compared to all the whiskey lovers, and it's evident to see, you know, we've recently been doing all these whiskey club tastings with rum here in the UK, and Julie Hamilton, my colleague from Elixir Distillers, gave me this list of whiskey clubs to contact, and she was like, watch out, you got to have thick skin if you're going to come into the whiskey world. Like, these guys are going to say, no, we don't want to hear about your rum. And it was the complete opposite. Everyone we contacted was like, yeah, let's talk about rum. We're interested. We've heard about this thing. We've heard it might not be this pirate drink or this, you know, sailors thing that we thought it was, or maybe it's not all sea monsters, maybe there is something else. And the second you give someone good quality booze, it doesn't matter what it is, what category it is, they're going to fall in love with it because they love quality.
So I'm so glad that you brought up the pirate part of it, and actually I'm gonna shine a spotlight on Ken, not because you look like a pirate, but I'm just trying to share the airspace here. But you know, one of the things that I often think about when it comes to rum as a category is that there is this sticky there's a segment of it where there is this stickiness. In other words, right, tiki culture and pirates and Captain Sparrow, you know, and all this stuff, and it's this kind of like tiki culture. And you know, Mitch, of course, you can answer afterwards, but Ken, from your perspective, do you think tiki culture is a way into rum, or are you know, or are the people who are into tiki already rum geeks? Like, is that its own thing? Can you talk to us about that a little bit? I think there may be someone on here that don't fully know about tiki culture.
Sure. And I mean, first of all, I just want to say I think Mitch has very eloquently hit the nail on the head of many aspects of what, you know, rum, gin, tequila, and many categories have faced. And it's really about and one thing to remember is people's preconceptions of spirit categories and spirit types. These evolving over time is something which takes decades. Okay, I was just thinking back. Actually, more than 20 years ago, I was living in London teaching bartenders how to pour gin and tonics. Believe it or not, that was a job. And that was it was from a big multinational training, and I was training hundreds of, a few thousand bartenders over a couple of years in central London about trying to change their perception of gin. Because it really was this mother's ruin, very antiquated, old-fashioned category which nobody was interested in, and so it was a world away from where gin is today. And I think so, whether it be tequila and rum specifically for us, the evolution of how people think about a category is something which takes a long time to change, and quite rightly. Many people think of rum as these, and I won't mention brands, but the big mainstream brands which aren't of the highest quality. They don't have a lot of depth of flavor or character, and they really are used for drinking with Coke. And there's not a lot else you can do with it. You have to mix it. If you were to drink any of those brands straight, neat, you'd be really surprised at how singular they are and how sort of how there's just no depth to the flavor. So that's something that moving people away and getting them to try better brands, and there's lots of great brands out there which have higher quality, far greater depth of flavor, even if they're still drinking it in that standard way, drinking it with Coke, rum and Coke. If they're drinking a better rum and Coke, that's a step forward. It's a step down the path of moving people to drinking it in other ways, sort of some of the old classic cocktails, which are more heavy, more spirit-based rather than mixer-based, and then moving on to actually experiencing and tasting, the rums or gins, whatever. Neat. So, sorry, getting back to your original question about tiki culture, it's a great addition. It's certainly, look, it's something which you see. In Europe, it's not that prevalent. There's a bit of it in the UK. Every major city will have a couple of tiki bars. So these are, sort of island themed, heavily rum focused. And people are going there for an experience. I think, I think rum, for some people in that occasion, rum is incidental. So it's more of that, the fun, the experience that they're going for. So, and then other people are going there who have from originally going there to experience the fun and the occasion of tiki culture, have then, experienced and then now start exploring rum to a greater degree. So I think it's probably a stepping stone for many people, because these bars will have, they'll have pouring rums of a standard quality, but they will typically have, a nice range of good rums as well that people can, chat to the bartender, learn about, and sample and evolve. So does that answer your question a bit? So I think tiki culture is helpful, but it does serve a couple of different roles.
Yeah, and that really was my question. Is something like that a help or a hindrance? I think with anything, people have different ways into a category, right? I got into whiskey one way, and other people got into whiskey another way, or in other ways, right? Or, I got into rum through rum and Cokes, and then I found out, wait a second, there's this other stuff that there's no sugar added, and there's these funky flavors going on. And okay, wait a second, this isn't something you just blend away. This is something that is interesting in and of itself. So I do like that idea that tiki culture can be sort of, maybe it's not the front door into rum, or maybe it is the front door into rum, or maybe it's the back door or the side window.
I think just if people are going to a bar which is serving, really the cheapest possible rum and serving that in sort of high volume in mixed drinks, that's not doing a great deal. it's people need to make the step on from that. So to discovering a better quality product, it's like things like that can be a hindrance. If you look at tequila, people going to a bar and drinking, cheap, well tequila with lemon and salt is something which holds that category back. That does nothing to advance people into, exploring better quality tequilas. I think the same can be certainly said for rum if people are drinking bad quality rums and don't get the opportunity to move beyond that.
Yeah, good. I want to switch gears a little bit, guys, if you don't mind, and discuss gin. Now, gin, when I think about rum coming into its own, which Ken, I think your point is a really good one. Is whiskey has spent decades getting to where it is. Rum will spend also decades getting to where it is, and it seems, and I could be wrong, and please correct me if I am wrong, but it seems as if there's a push on the rum side to focus on the craft and the artisanal and natural rums. But then conversely, on the gin side, we're seeing a lot of growth in flavored rums, sugared rums, not rums, I'm sorry, flavored gins and sugared gins and things like that. And that seems to be driving the market a bit more nowadays. Maybe I'm wrong there, but I'm curious, and I'll start with Hamish, if you don't mind. What are your thoughts there? From is flavored gins and sugar gins and all these, is that a help to the category? Is that helping you as a gin producer? Is that getting people into the front door?
Right, before I answer that, Joshua, I'm just going to pray that my connection stays with me. I have no reason why it's been so terrible. I was down in the distillery with the botanic drying room, and luckily I live on site, so I've run all the way back up to the house, and hopefully I'm now in my little office. And just to warn you, if you see an owl flying over behind me, that's my best friend Rue. So I share my house with 5 kids and 5 dogs and a wife and an owl, so it's quite hectic. So Sam, I'm also really sorry I sort of missed a lot of the introduction, but anyway, I'll just keep my fingers crossed that me and the owl can stay on camera. So flavored gin did a lot to bring the gin category forward completely. I have a big problem with using ingredients that we can't naturally grow here. I think Sam might have said that obviously as a herb garden, we grow all our own botanics. So I can't grow sugar, not in Scotland. I can grow grapes, but not sugar. So,
oh, darn it. See, I called on him first in the hopes that we can get a sound bite, and then he may kick off, and look at that, he's kicked off.
I think the owl might have jumped on the router.
I think that's I think that's exactly what's happening. Oh, he's come on. We'll give him one more shot. Here we go. You're on, Martin. Hamish.
Give me one more go, Joshua.
Right. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. So from my perspective, I only like to use what we can grow. So I won't use flavorings, colors, sugars, but it has helped catapult the gin category completely. So more people now are drinking gin because of the flavored gin, because of the sugared products. But for me, that's not really what I'm about.
Jeez Louise. It was right at the edge there. You know what? We'll wait for him to come on.
I think you should talk about rum because he has his owl. He looks like a pirate there with a.
So, Tal, now that we have your attention, one of the things that I've appreciated, not just about rum but about gin as well, is that there is a terroir aspect to it, right? Jamaican rums taste a certain way. Barbados rums taste a certain way, and with gins, you're allowed to focus on local botanicals if you want, and really try to hyper focus on a region. And I think with Levantine gin, you've done just that. Well, there's one ingredient in particular that just screams Israel to me, and that's za'atar.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you could talk about that, the importance of regionality when making gin.
So I think when you look at the gin world, until a few years ago, you were talking about mostly about London dry gins, and it's lovely when you taste them one next to the other, so you can feel the differences. But then if you just take it into a cocktail, it's really hard to differentiate between them. And when we're looking at the new world gins or the contemporary gins, like they call it in the competitions, this is the fun thing. This is the when your art comes in, or your where you live and what you do, and your area, because you can actually. The good thing about gin is that you need alcohol and you need juniper, and then you can play with whatever you want. And for us, it's crazy. It's something that it's just we taking all of our cuisine inside one bottle. I think I tasted some Spanish gins. I think we need to thank the Spanish for the gin boom for the last few years, and they were using only local ingredients. But so some of the ingredients wasn't grown in Spain, but they use those ingredients in their culture. And this is the same thing for us. I think if you're looking at what you asked Hamish about those pink gins or flavored gins, we are on the other side. So our gins are flavored, but with the real stuff. And I think both of those kind of style of gins are opening the gin segment for more and more consumers. The one that can drink the pink gins or the sweet gins, and the one that can drink something that is really from the other side of the spectrum for a London dry gin. In Israel, we came from all over the world, so we are all a mix. We live in Tel Aviv, which is it's one city with Jaffa. Jaffa is 3,000 years old. Tel Aviv is 100 and something years old, and it's all a mix of local people that grew up here and with people that came from all over the world. So our cuisine is a blend of everything, local ingredients and stuff that brought from all over the world. And I think you can find it in our gin, which is a kind of a big sandwich or something like that.
Yeah, your gin in particular, well, I shouldn't say in particular, but because I think Herb Garden has its own particular thing that it does that absolutely intrigues me. But a lot of people who may be watching this may not know how incredibly artisanal gin can be. And your process of producing Levantine gin is unlike any other process that I'm familiar with. So can you explain the process of your gin and maybe how it differs from your standard? I'm not going to name any names, but your bottom shelf jugs of gin that you're just going to toss with some tonic.
Okay, so first of all, we are a whiskey distillery. We are a single malt whiskey distillery, and we are making gin from a single malt ingredients. If you look at other very famous gins around the world, even if they are made in a whiskey distillery, they're probably made from either grain spirit or just a neutral spirit. We don't distill anything else except barley. We actually did once. It was a kind of sugar just to help to make some sanitizer in the first lockdown here. Fortunately, Israel is out. We don't have any lockdowns. We're just everyone is vaccinated, so we are out there. So we start with the same raw material, double distillation of malted barley, and then instead of cutting it a little bit with water and putting it into the casks, we actually take it into 250 liters, very small, old school Alambic pot still. And then the guys are actually, Oded, which is working with me in the international sales, is in charge of the gin making. And he's actually going to the market. There's a market, there's two markets actually, but one is the spice market, is just like 1 kilometer from the distillery. It's called the Lewinsky market, very old market. And he actually buys those ingredients, the botanicals there. And you should see him just peeling a lemon after a lemon. And then of course we're making margaritas because we don't, nothing to do with the lemons without a peel. So it goes to the visitor center's bar. But then, so lemons and
Oranges, we're from Jaffa, so Jaffa oranges, black pepper, cinnamon,
lemon verbena, chamomile, and of course za'atar. Which za'atar, if you don't know that, it's a kind of wild relative of wild oregano. It's much spicier oregano. We use it fresh, and it grows wild on the mountains of Jerusalem, and you can find it in the market. And sometimes in the winter it's hard to find it. We had a problem with it. We had a big order from Germany, I think, like a year ago, and we needed to go actually and almost to find and cut those za'atar leaves. So those ingredients goes into this little pot still for 48 hours, and then another distillation only with the lemon peels and the fresh za'atar, like in a cart ahead. But all of this is very, very small batches. When we need to do a big shipment, we are working on that rapidly. So if you take the
base, if you take the triple distillation, because we do another distillation with the botanicals, and if you take those crazy
botanicals inside, which are something that we eat, with the za'atar, Joshua, with olive oil, with the pita bread or something like that. There's nothing that is more, out there than the regular
well gin or a good London dry gin. It's just the opposite.
You get a body on that. It's a very thick gin because of the malt base, and of course it's a spicy one. And if we're talking about rums, it's the same thing. It's a sipping gin. So for us, when you taste a whiskey, you just have a drink. We're talking about gin and tonic. I'm not really crazy about our gin with tonic. It's a nice drink. I prefer it with ginger ale, but it's gonna make a great martini. You remember we were sitting in Tomer's lab, and the blending lab there, and with a cask of whiskey having a martini, and so
I'll never forget. That was delicious. A manzanilla wash.
Yeah.
With the Levantine gin and just a drop of olive oil on the top.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So if we're talking about this side of the industry, bartenders, we're our gin was not born for cocktails, but it can give you, if you're a good bartender, it can give you a nice idea to make some out of the box cocktails like this martini with manzanilla sherry or whatever. So the base is different than a regular gin, the regular London gin, and of course the method and the ingredients are so different.
Yeah, that's great. Hamish is trying to get on. We'll see how that works out. But before we bring Hamish back on, I realize that Aaron, Mike, and Gilo have been dangerously quiet. Like almost scarily quiet for three guys who are used to talking, and I want to give you some room to stretch. So, is there anything you wanted to bring up or ask of Mitch or Tal or Ken or Hamish, who I'm bringing right back on now?
Well, actually, I have one thing. I was thinking about it when we were talking about people's way in to a spirit. And everything's kind of exploded in the last 20 years, whether it's craft beer, whiskey, all this stuff. But it's also followed food. So don't you think people that are more adventurous in terms of cuisine and trying different things are going to be more receptive to trying these spirits on their own? I mean, there's got to be a correlation between the two.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because you
Ken,
figure any restaurant like any restaurant that's really like good, they all have like a cocktail program or a cocktail menu, and most of them are using, you know, brands like stuff like this. You know.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if.
I mean, that was. You remind me. I mean, when I remember a conversation with, when I was working in the trade years ago, a conversation with a bar owner, and they were serving, very standard spirits, and their perception at the time was they didn't feel a need to basically up their range from standard products to sort of more artisanal. And so, I asked them, well, what sort of coffee do you serve? Do you serve instant? And they're like, oh my God, of course not. We have this beautiful machine here that we've spent thousands on, and we have this highly trained barista, and we have only the best beans, and we make sure the machine is exquisitely maintained. Our customers demand fantastic coffee. I say, well, explain to them, do you see any different? Do you think that their attitude to spirits is any different from wanting good coffee to wanting high quality spirits? And it was only this sort of analogy that got them to change their perspective and realize, well, I shouldn't be serving junk, in the well, when that's not what their venue is about. Their venue is about providing quality products, quality coffee, great food. But so I think some, in the trade, people have to, people who've been in the business for a long time may have be stuck in a rut.
It would seem that the whiskey drinker that we know today is way more experienced and way more experimental than they were 5 years, 10 years ago. And maybe the foodie culture is part of that, like Angelo said. But I think it would seem for you guys, with all of the brands that are available, it's got to be kind of tough to get your product in front of a bartender or get your product in front of a store owner to differentiate from the next brand. How do you guys, what's the strategy to do that in this culture of there's so much of everything?
I think from our side, it's, I think even more than rums, the gin is, it's still growing around the world, but there's more brands than people that consume it. So you need to stand out. You need to be different because there are more and more of the same. And
it is hard. It's for us. It's like we talked about those restaurants and the foodie culture. Our cuisine was just booming all over the world until the pandemic started. Our cuisine is, I think, the best restaurants in America for 2 years in a row were all kinds of Israeli restaurants around Philadelphia or I don't remember where. So it really helps. Zahab, yeah. Zahab, and there's another one in
there are
New
two
Orleans.
in Philadelphia that are pretty well known.
Yeah,
and the same thing in London and in Paris, and so it really helped us because for Israelis, when you think about Israel, you don't think about gin or whiskey in the first thought. But I think the best ambassadors for us is our cuisine, our taste, and this comes with the culture and with the kind of taste. So it is hard because there's so many brands now. You need to stand out, and this is why our gin is for our taste. It's a gin for whiskey drinkers.
Yeah. What about on the rum side, Mitch? Like, Black Tot has a wonderful story, a rich history for those people who understand history. How do you make Black Tot stand out amongst the rest of the rums?
It's a great question, and it is a challenge. Usually bribery. Normally, I just go in and pour everyone shots, and after we've done that enough times, they just magically fall in love with it. So that definitely helps. But when you don't have the luxury of bars being open as we haven't had the last few months and things like that, I think a lot of brands and we've seen a lot of brands really struggle to sort of pivot, as the 2020 phrase used, to adjust to all these kind of things. And I think the brands that have done very well are the ones where, hopefully like ourselves, where we've just had a really good story to tell, and we've focused on education. We've focused on well, let's tell you the real story of what Navy rum actually is, not just what, is a convenient marketing story. And I think once you start offering, more education and getting under the surface story of these kind of things, because we've all been to those brand presentations or seen people present their product, and they just drone on an hour marketing script that they've been told, and you're just just tell me what you actually think about it. Tell me what's really going on with your spirit or with your rum. And I think when you're honest, when you actually enjoy it, when you actually want to get under the nuts and bolts on it, that helps a lot, So certainly with Black Top, our focus has been, I guess, twofold. One, yes, the historical aspect, because there's a huge part of Navy rum history which never really gets told and often gets left out. And I think it's very interesting for people who are into that kind of thing. So on one angle, we've tried to really uncover that and look at Navy history in more detail. But then on the other side, we've tried to look at modern day rum blending and go, well, what are the aspects which often get glossed over, And so often you look at a bottle of rum and you go, I don't even know what country it's from. It might just say oh, it's the Caribbean. Cool. So which of the 700 islands on the Caribbean is from? Doesn't matter. It's all the same. No, we've got to get more specific. And so we've sort of really leaned into that and gone, right, okay, here's not just the countries, but the distilleries, and here's even the blend percentages that we're using. So you can see how much influence the Barbados component is giving you versus the Guyanese versus the Jamaican. And for anyone who's done a tasting with us, we'll deconstruct it and give you the actual blended components. And you can't even buy them, but it's just interesting to taste them, because you go, oh wow, okay, that's what each one of these notes tastes individually, and here's the final product. I think that for me that lends very heavily into the food movement, because I think in the booze world we often have this idea of I can't tell them what's in it because they might go out and copy me. It's what are you talking about? First of all, everyone's too arrogant. They'd always change something, so don't worry about that. But second of all, it'd be like watching a celebrity chef on TV, like Gordon Ramsay, going, oh, here's this dish. I'm not going to tell you what's in it, though, in case you go and open a restaurant. It's no, the whole reason they show you how to prepare this dish is so that, one, you might be inspired. Two, you might actually go and seek out these ingredients or discover some new flavor which you didn't know about before. And three, you go, wow, okay, that's actually quite a bit of work and thought that's gone into that. I now appreciate that final dish more. And for me, I think exactly the same is true with blending and with rum and with any spirit.
It's a perfect comment right here. But yeah, Mitch, I really liked what you said about this education component and a bit of the transparency component. And Ken, I feel Rum and Cane Merchants does something similar, right? Where you focus on regionality and blending for region specific flavors. Can you talk about that and how you convey that to the consumer?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I guess just before that, to explain, we actually started as a Scotch whiskey company. So, we have a Scotch whiskey brand, and we sort of fell into rum because one of my partners, he worked out in Trinidad, became a huge fan of rum, and he then exposed us to it, and we fell in love with rum and thought we've got to go into this. And so what we've done, and going back to I think Aaron's question earlier about how do you differentiate in the market. And I think part of that is about doing something unique. So what we've done is applied, because rum is largely unregulated. So as long as rum is made from sugarcane, you can pretty much slap rum on the label and call it a rum. But with nearly 30 different countries or so making rum, there's not a lot of broad regulations, and so people are adding sugar after the fact, in the bottle to raise the sweetness, cover the harshness. They're adding flavors, colors, so it's a real cocktail in so many rums. Some rums aren't rum at all. So with that, we basically apply the Scotch whisky rules to rum. So we don't chill filter. We don't add any flavors, any sugars, any colors. It's just pure rum. Now, going back to Josh's question, so we're creating, as was spoken about earlier, the terroir of rum. So we make regional blends. So, for instance, this is a British West Indies, and it's one cask from Barbados, from Foursquare, and one cask from Trinidad Distillers in Trinidad, brought together. And with the rum we have in the US, we've increased deeper. These are a minimum 8 years, but we've added more deep age Trinidad to sort of bring in some of the boldness of that rum into this British West Indies. So what we're doing is creating something which is in a British style of rum, but something unique by bringing together the Foursquare and the Trinidad when they've never been brought together like this before. And so we do that. Also, we have from Asia, we have the Asia Pacific, which is a cask from Fiji and a cask from Indonesia. And again, with this for the US, we've put in deeper age Fiji, which really ups the ante on that rum. So that's what we're doing. So it's something unique and interesting, and done with applying the Scotch whisky rules to it.
What's interesting is all of your stories. There's a uniqueness in all of them, right? Tal, you got something made in Israel. Nothing comes from Israel in the spirits world generally. Chris, we haven't gotten to you on the Japanese product, but they're all unique in their own way. Versus the large brands, the evil empire brands, there is no story to them, right? They're all very big, and the label makes them different. You don't know what's inside. You don't know what the story is because they're made in such massive volume. It doesn't really matter. They're so homogenized. Whereas these are, Joshua, back to your original word, artisanal, craft. They're about terroir. They're about location. They're about people. Whereas you don't get that with big brands. And I think that's what the whiskey drinker, which I am and which Angelo and Mike are, that's what we like. That's what we want to hear about. That's how we get into a different category. I think that's what makes you guys unique, all of you.
Aaron, I think that for us, a craft or artisanal, it's not only the size and not only where you come from. It's the way of thinking. And Joshua knows that Tomer, the head distiller, and me, we go crazy with whiskeys. We go crazy with all kinds of casks. And with gin, so we had one gin, and then we decided to make just a distillery exclusive and an aged gin in an STR red wine cask. I don't know, we're going to sell it only at the visitor center, of course, which started selling outside. But then we needed another exclusive for the visitor center. So we did a nice, only one cask of an Isla cask, gin in an Isla cask, a peated cask. And then there was no visitors because there was a pandemic. But the guys from Taiwan really wanted it, so we sold it to them. And now, but the guy from Taiwan told me, the guys in Taiwan are drinking very high strength, so we made a Navy strength gin for them. And we're playing all the time. And this is, crazy. You have an idea. Let's take 2 quarter casks of Lafroig and let's see what happens. And this is the way, the craft way of thinking, the artisan's way of thinking. It's not only where you come from, it's the way and we are hectic, so it's a part of our culture.
There was a question that came in that specific to Ken, but I'm gonna put a pin in that for a second because I want to save sort of the last 30 minutes or so to some Q&A. We've been talking about gin and rum, and everybody in this chat room and everybody who's watching us has heard of gin and rum. They've had it in a cocktail, they've had it straight, you name it. However, most people have not heard of Japanese umeshus. And I've known about them for a couple of years, and I've had some of them, but I'm still learning, and I have a lot to learn. And Chris Udy here is going to be talking about some umeshus from Matsui. But what is this category that no one knows about? Is it a cocktailable product just like gin and rum? Is it something that is no? You never do that. It's you drink it by itself. So what is it? How is it made, and how would you drink it?
Well, I think first with anything else that you might drink, it's all about expression, right? Like, I think the underlining theme of what we're doing today is the simplicity of expression. Like, where's your investment? So between Milk and Honey and Hamish with their gins, it is a category that's pretty well defined with just the spirit and the juniper, and then from there you can express. The same thing with the black top rum and the rum and cane. With umeshu, you can kind of go a little bit bananas with it because you can do it as a simple highball, but really it's kind of like umeshu is just one of those things. You basically just take spirit and you add ume to it. And ume, the way it translates is a plum, but it's actually more closely related to an apricot. It's got a higher citric content than plum does. Plum's at about 1 to 2%, whereas the ume is the Japanese plum is more like around 5%. And you just take it and you put it in there with sugar, with rock sugar, and you let it sit, and it's basically kind of like a glass-aged cocktail, if you will, or a glass-aged infusion. So it's a very, very distant cousin to gin, maybe, like a maceration, but without a second distillation on it. But the main thing about umeshu is that ume means plum, shu means alcohol. The main thing about it is that it's just fucking delicious, and when you start drinking it, you're going to get wrecked because it's going to go down way too easy. And I highly recommend that you take it and mix it with rum and gin and just go bananas because it's a lot of fun. But you'll see a lot of people in Japan, they'll make their own version in their house where they'll take a shochu and they'll put a bunch of umeboshi in it and let it sit for yeah, that's right. I'm less cultured than the rest of the guys on the thing here. But it's just pleasant. It's on the sweeter side. It has a little bit of sourness to it as well. So it's kind of it's sweet and sour and tangy and just wonderful. And
Chris, what's the background of it? Is it a very old spirit? Is it something newer?
So the ume plum dates back to China, like 2000 BC. It was introduced in Japan during the Yayoi period, which is like from 400 BC to 380. I know that's a 700-year span, but they didn't have the cloud back then to archive all this in real time. But it's the first written record that they have of it in Japan dates back over 300 years, and that was a book that kind of told you how to make it. The only problem was 300 years ago in Japan, sugar was a severely luxury item, so people really couldn't afford it. It wasn't part of their diet, so it was like a rich man's drink back then. But now it's an everyday drink. Like umeshu in Japan is the equivalent of amaretto when we're teenagers, or I'm trying to think of another, or like it's really the equivalent of rum in the United States, right? If you think of something, and by the way, Ken and Mitch, like I get that we do this stuff on the drier side, but you know what I'm talking about. Like when you're younger and you're exposed to drinking and you get into rum because it's on the sweeter side, that's what umeshu kind of is. But it's like everyone has it. It's a table drink over there. It just hasn't really permeated into our culture yet.
Chris, I'm tasting Slivovitz, and I will understand that, or some people from JVS will, I don't know if Val is with us, he'll be very proud of it. Slivovitz, plum brandy. That's what I'm tasting here.
Yes, Slivovitz is...
Joshua once told me that he never came across a good Slivovitz.
I've yet to come across a good Slivovitz. So
There you
I
go.
can say I've had delicious umeshus. I have yet to have a delicious Slivovitz.
So
I
two
told you,
different things, right? A
come back
sliver
to Israel.
is a spirit distilled from the plum, whereas an
Yeah.
umeshu is an infusion into the spirit with plum. So it's you have your spirit, then you infuse the umeboshi and the rock sugar in it. So it's
Yes.
fun.
What's
maybe
the
that-
ABV? What's the ABV on the Umeshu?
Maybe 14%. It's light. So it's typically you kind of use it as an aperitif. So umeboshi and soda water, and then you can kind of drink for days. Or you can use it as a modifier in a cocktail to add a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of savory characteristics too.
Mm. Nice.
I think if I can jump in for a second, this is something, and hopefully I'm not too out of school with this. I have no affiliation to this product. It was something I was given for Christmas, and it was an advent calendar. So you imagine this was 24 bottles of Slivovitz. So that was
Send it to me.
so that was 30 ml, one a day. Like the kids are having their chocolate every day with their advent calendar. I had a small shot every day, and this is something I think certainly with the pandemic as well. We've seen a huge growth in these sort of miniature packs as a way for people to explore. For rum and cane in Europe, we have a miniature pack which has a range of four of the rums, and people buy them online like crazy. And what you see very often is I'll see customers order 4 of them or 5 of them, and they'll send one to themselves. They'll send the others off to different friends. Everybody's at home, and they have a Zoom party, and they break open their packs and have a tasting session, live when everybody's stuck at home. So these are things which I think it's helped people with the isolation and keep connected with their friends, but at the same time helps them discover, the breadth of a spirit category. So across different types of rum or different types of whiskey, and these sorts of things I think have been wonderful over the past year.
I think that even guys like us that we're working in the industry for a long time, we're discovering more and more new stuff during this pandemic. Because I was going everywhere, to work every day, but it's still
You're drinking more. I had a Zoom meeting, a Zoom tasting in Germany, and the guy that was actually conducting the tasting, I think a few days afterwards he did a aquavit tasting. So I told him I want to be a part of that. He told me you can't speak German, so you know what? I'll send you over some bottles. Let's do with all the M&H team. Let's do an aquavit tasting. So we did it last week. We had 10 kinds of Danish, Norwegian, German, and whatever aquavits. Opened us to a new world. All the rest of the guys from the distillery are just, the distillmen and everyone just, tasting all kinds of Kümmel and dill spirits, and it was crazy. But there's another way of opening because of what happened the last year. And Umeshu is one that I just tasted in a Japanese restaurant here like a few days ago, and another rum, another gin. I think the only good thing that can come up from this
agent time, it's that we exploring much more.
Mm. So listen, we have about 27 minutes left, and I want to get to some of the questions that have been popping up. But firstly, Chris, thank you so much for talking about Umeshu and educating us. And I was Aaron Prost was commenting earlier, saying, it sounds like it's going to be something very sweet, maybe too sweet. But then again, he likes port, and I suggested the Umeshus that I've had, I would drink like a port. I would drink like a Madeira. It's almost like it feels more like a fortified wine than it does a liqueur. Would you agree with that statement?
I would.
Or no?
No, absolutely. I would agree with that statement. It's it's got a little bit of a sour, savory note to it as well. So it's the idea. Remember, with anything Japanese, is that it's got to be spherical and built out from the center. So it's going to be. They try to balance all sides of it so that it makes sense. Like cloyingly sweet's just not part of their not part of their arsenal, right? Even when we buy the pastries, they're not as sweet as American pastries. So I think Aaron will be okay with trying it out. I think he'll dig it.
Well, this Aaron would want to put it on vanilla ice cream.
I'd also put it onto my. There we go. Wow, you just took the words out of me. Yeah.
That's great.
It's kind of fun. It's almost like a toned down Sour Patch Kid, if you want to go that way, or like a vermouth without all the herbs. It kind of goes along those lines.
If you guys have ever been to like a sushi restaurant where they drop the ume in the dashi and you have it as like a soup before you start eating to kind of get you ready to start eating, if that makes sense, then it's kind of the same thing. But
no, it's fun. It's a fun.
After a big stuffy dinner, but Chris, next thing we're gonna do, we can go into ice cream business.
So listen, we've got a question for Tal here from Elijah Ammon. He's curious to know about the texture, the oiliness on the palate, which is, Elijah is much like me. When I put a drink in my mouth, I first focus on the texture. The second sip is the flavor, but the first sip is what does that feel like? How's it rolling on your tongue? So how are you getting that really rich, viscous texture with your gin?
So again, I'm coming back to the raw material, which is malt. So we do a double distillation of malted barley. We cut very high and very short. So the heart, the same as our whiskeys, is between 80 and 70% ABV. So it's an average of 73%. When we're doing peated barley, we're doing some, we cut a bit lower because we need some oils from the tails. But we do that because of our climate. We do a short maturation. We do something like 3-4 years, and there's less oxidation, so we need less of the tails. So you get a very clean and very full-bodied spirit when you do a very high cut. And then the two-line arms of the two stills are going in a 45 degrees angle down. So almost no reflux. Everything goes just straight down, and you get a very full, oily spirit. And when it goes again to the third still for the gin, it's a very small, and again the angle is the same, and you get the full-bodied. I think some of the oils in the oranges and the citrus and the lemons are getting some of this feel as well. We actually add a little bit, something like 50% of just spirit without any botanicals, which we distill in a column still, just to air it up a little bit. Because when we did only a single malt gin, it was very heavy. This one is heavy, but it's lighter than what we did before. But again, it's all because of the raw material and the way we distill it.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you. And we've got another question also from Elijah. He's the man with the questions here. And he's asking about the rum I'm about to pour next, which I'm really excited. This is my favorite in the rum and cane series for the US, and Elijah says the same. So can you talk a little bit about the French overseas and how it's created?
So French overseas, and that's the one which I don't have a bottle of here at the moment, which is because I drank it. So it's empty. I have plenty of others here, but it really is something very interesting because it's for anybody who doesn't know, that is it's our French overseas. It's a single cask from La Réunion, which is that's a classic agricole. So it's a cane juice rum, and the second cask is from Martinique, which is again it's a French rum, but it's actually a molasses rum. So it's one of the few French rums which is molasses based rather than cane juice agricole. So what's really interesting with this is you get because the molasses rums, that's the vast majority of rums available and produced. sort of in a it's a heavier, richer these rich fruits, sort of caramel type flavors. You get that there, but then the agricole rum from Reunion, it's much more lighter, more aromatic. You get sort of vegetable flavors, other sort of levels of alcohol. So you get this two level where you got the molasses rum with this richness and heaviness, and then these other lighter, much lighter flavors coming through, more aromatic flavors from the agricole. It's really interesting because they're both French, but they're both incredibly different. And when you both on the nose, you can really detect the multi-layered aspect of the rum, and then likewise on the palate and the finish, it just delivers so beautifully with these multi-leveled notes. I don't know if that answers the question, or if there's any more to that, Josh. Or
no, I think you described the process really, really well. But one of the things that draws me to this particular rum, sometimes I like it when a drink takes you on a bit of a journey from nose to palate to finish, and you kind of don't know where you're going. This isn't that. This tells you exactly where you're going on the nose. And sometimes you want that, right? Sometimes you want this just lovely, comforting spirit. And there's a sweetness to it, but there's this depth, this earthy quality to it that I just find really, really comforting and enjoyable.
Yeah, look, and of all of our rums, that's the one, because we are working on single casks. It's the one rum we've had really trouble keeping enough stock of. We just can't make enough of it, because in particular France, they basically will buy everything we can make, and so it's been a real struggle to actually make enough to supply other countries. So sorry, go on.
I was going to say, Joshua, how when we started with whiskey, that broad term of whiskey and what it encapsulates, right? Bourbons and ryes and single malts and Irish and Scotch, and we were kind of slightly overwhelmed by it, right? And then when you get into the rum world, it's even more mind-boggling. I remember when I got my wife the Smuggler's Cove book, and looking in the list of rum categories in that book, I thought it was just rum. I didn't know there were dark rum and light rum, right? And it was amazing how many categories. And like you guys said, like Mitch said, you've got different countries, 700 islands, all over the world rum is being made. It's just amazing. And we're still buying into, as a general public, that rum is the stuff on the shelf, mass produced. We don't think about it. It's 3 letters, RUM, make it rum and Coke. But there's so much variety to it. It's amazing. I don't know that I can ever learn it all.
And what's crazy is when you look at, say, if you look at the basic side of, well, what's the base of the rum? So molasses. So you look at the vast majority of rums, they're made from molasses, and the vast majority also use American oak ex-bourbon casks, and they're made in either a pot or a column. But if you look at those factors, there's no difference between hundreds of different rums out there, and yet the flavor, it's entirely different. It has the same breadth of flavor or more than you would get with Scotch whiskey.
Would you and this question is for either you, Ken, or Mitch, or the both of you, and then I do have a question for Hamish, because I did see that his video has been staying on stronger than it ever has been, so we will get to you, Hamish. Christ, what was my question? So really, what was my question here?
On rum.
On rum.
For myself or Mitch.
For yourself.
Was it about rum?
Yeah, it was about rum. Oh my gosh, I had a complete brain fart here.
Well, while you think about it, I would just like to chime in. It's kind of a perfect storm of what's happening right now in the spirits industry as a whole, because Ken, like you said, there are nominal differences between the different producers of rum, yet the flavor components are just the flavor profiles are all over the place. And we're seeing that in the craft gin movement, we're seeing it in the rum movement, And then we're seeing it being brought forth with agave as well. And it's historically been done with whiskey, but I think now more than ever, with the world whiskeys coming into play and the Scotch whiskeys doing more innovation than historically they have. And then with American whiskeys as well, with all the craft distilleries coming on board, and even bourbon kind of getting off its old butt and experimenting with different cask types. And so all of this has created a perfect storm for people to research, to like really dive in from a flavor standpoint and just enjoy riding the wave of all the changes and trying to figure out where all the differences come from. And then there's little nuances of when agave people talk about the wild yeast, and when rum people complement that with wild yeast as well. And then when you have different people talking about glass aging versus barrel aging and using the same types of oaks at different latitudes, and the Taiwanese making their whiskey, it just, I think the rising tide is carrying the ship of people wanting to explore more of what they can put in their gullet, and we're all the benefit of it. And it's kind of nice, right? You got your
look, and then add on to that cask finishing as well. We've been experimenting with doing different sorts of cask finishes. So we've been doing that for years with our Scotch whiskies, and so now we're throwing different rums into a Madeira cask or an Oloroso or a PX. We're now looking at a stout, a porter, doing some beer finishes, just to experiment, just to see what it's like. And
that's
so
great, right? It's the opposite end of the seesaw. So on the one end, you've got the cask finishing, and on the other end, you have the blending of the individual rums into a unique expression within itself. And it's kind of like you realize, and Aaron, it goes back to what you said. You realize the more you get into it, the more you have to learn, and it's a very dark and deep tunnel, but there's a lot of party happening in that tunnel. So join us as we go through it together.
The rum rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So there's only one downside to all this.
Yeah,
we only get one liver. That's the problem.
They are now growing organs in petri dishes, and I figure that I'm young enough to where I might be a benefactor of all of that science coming to head. Where I can just
look at that, G-Lo trying to come in as the buzzkill, but
no, not at all.
Chris had a comeback.
It's just I want more. You can only do so much.
Chris, your point was much better than the one that I was going to make for Mitch and Ken. So I'll just move on, because I want to talk to Hamish, and I want to give Hamish a bit of time that unfortunately he didn't get earlier. Hamish, earlier on, we were talking with Tal about how they're making their Levantine gin, because it's quite the procedure is unusual, or maybe it isn't unusual, but it's unusual from a whiskey drinker's perspective. You just don't understand that process. The way that you're making gin over at Secret Garden / Herb Garden is quite unusual. You're having a ton of fun, but you're doing it from a botanics perspective rather than an alcohol perspective. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, Joshua, I think, I had no intention to make a gin. I think there's enough gins in the world, but we created the Secret Herb Garden to grow herbs, sell herbs, educate people about nature, making sure. I spend my life trying to explain to farmers, gardeners, that we don't need to use chemicals when we're working with Mother Nature. So the actual gin, it's like you guys were saying before about experimenting. Well, I experiment with plants. That's it. And I always say a limitless imagination means a limitless amount of possibilities. So I was actually just playing with our Apotheca roses and and our damask roses, which you have in front there. And that uniqueness, I was wanting to try and show you the gin lounge and the drying room and the still room, because basically what it was all about was the gin was a matter of survival. This wasn't a business plan that I came up with. We're a herb nursery, a small cafe, and to try and get people to come to this. But we're quiet in the winter. And I had a little 3-liter still and was always experimenting, and made this gin with the roses that change color. And really the whole process went from there. I find it quite funny. I also was listening about, Scotch whiskey and the laws of Scotch whiskey. That was I've been in the distilling trade all my life. That was my father that pushed through the Scotch whiskey definition through Parliament. So I have been involved in this drinks business my whole life. But for me, it's all about, for gin, it's all about the botanics. It's all about the plants and bringing them to the forefront. And I love the experimentation that you guys have all been talking about in the spirit trade. And for me, it's exactly that. It's experimenting with the plants and living plants, really, that makes the difference for us.
Yeah, when last we spoke, and Elijah had commented earlier, he had mentioned the interview that we had with you on the One Nation Under Whiskey podcast. You talk about distillation, not just of the alcohol, but of the water as well, that you're diluting the final spirit with. Can you talk about the reasons for doing that?
Yeah. So I'm a trained herbalist as well. So basically, we make tinctures, infusions, you name it. There's things that we do. But one of the things that we actually do is to make water distillates, which is an ancient art. I mean, this goes back to Israel, actually, the sort of master ways of making distilled waters. It's an ancient craft. And in herbalism, we do that. So I've been making distilled waters with all of our different, about 40 different plants. And we actually, this new sort of non-alcoholic, dare not want to mention that word in front of you guys, sorry. But the sort of non-alcoholic movement now, yeah, exactly. Basically, that's Rue chipping in. She doesn't like the non-alcoholic either. That's actually we make one as well, but it's made from the distilled waters. So what we're doing for that rose gin, the elderflower, the lemon verbena, we're actually taking fresh plant material. So yes, we have the neutral grain spirit. We distill the gin like you would over the botanics. And I always call that the bones of the product, the bones of the gin. But we also get to the very soul of a product. When you make a water distillate, you're getting to the pure essence of the primary aromas. And so you're able to get it so pure and so clean. So we add a little bit of that to the gin, and it's, of this distillate to really enhance that rose flavor. That rose characteristic that you'll pick up, or the elderflower. And then actually the color is purely from petals. So we're drying the petals, we get the color that rose gin is, and the fact that it turns pink. I'll tell you about the pink elderflower, but the fact it turns pink is actually, it happens in the plant kingdom quite a lot. It's something called anthocyanin that's in the petals and the citric acid in the tonic. It's an alkaline reaction is making it turn pink. I mean, literally, we have about sort of 30, 40 different flowers that have this anthocyanin that's in it. So it's fun. And really, so for me, it's the body. You get to the true soul of the spirit by doing the water distillate. And then, you've got the bones of the gin, but you're getting the whole sort of three essence by using the flesh of the actual petals themselves. So for me, the gin actually embodies the whole power of the plants themselves.
Yeah, I received my sample bottles a couple weeks back, and just before I went on vacation, I made just a simple gin and tonic with the damask rose and juniper gin, and my wife is not a gin drinker, but she tasted it. She said, "This is pure summer happiness in a glass." It was just gorgeous. It was everything that she wanted, right? We're here it is in Connecticut. It's spring. Things are starting to get warmer. You're getting spring fever. And it was the perfect thing for her. And it was beautiful watching that color change just by the addition of a bit of tonic.
Yeah, it's if she got that, then that's mission completed. If she's getting, plants, we all forget how important that in the trade, we know how important the aroma is. But actually, as a herbalist, we don't think that aroma is that important. But if I give a bouquet of sweet peas or a rose to somebody, you should see them smile. And it is, and it will take them back to a memory or something further back down the line. So the aroma of plants, actually, as a medicine, the flactory system is really important. And if someone's getting that reminds them of summer, or yes, they get the clarity of the rose, or there's a connection made to the plant, happy days for me.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. We've got about 5 minutes left, and there was one question. There was a gentleman who came on to the live stream. He either came on late or he started chatting late. And given who this is, I assume he came in late because he's a bit of a chatty Cathy. And so we have the lovely Bino Gopal, who asks high ester versus low ester for rums. And just really quickly, Mitch, Ken, before you talk about this, and anyone else can chime in if they like. Mitch, at one time early on, you had compared the idea of esters and the level of esters within a rum to the way a Scotch whiskey drinker would talk about the level of peatiness on an Islay whiskey, right? The higher the peat, the more smoky it'll be. The higher the ester, the more funky it will be. So what are your thoughts individually? What are your thoughts? High ester versus low ester? Is there value in both, especially when it comes to blending? I imagine the answer there may be yes, but what are your thoughts there?
So, well, first of all, yeah, there is definitely a movement in the rum world with rum geeks. And I think in any spirit category this happens, but as soon as you put a number on something, everyone wants to try the highest. It's like, how many esters is that? Only 1,000? Oh, I only drink 1,500 esters, you know, like, oh, only 1,500. And there is this sort of machoism that comes through in drinking. And you know it because you know those people who only drink, you know, the smokiest Octomores, and you know those beer drinkers who only drink like cans of actual just hops falling out the cans, no liquid in there whatsoever. And you do get you get rum people. Like I've got a friend in Amsterdam, a guy called Chris, and he cracked open this bottle of Long Pond Tekka, like 1,600 ester rum, and he poured it and he went, oh yeah, that's what rum should be. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like on what given day would you get home from work and be like, oh, you know what I want to drink now to relax? Rocket fuel. Like, do you know, like it's a fascinating thing to drink. I think high ester rums can be beautiful and incredible expressions of rum to drink. And they are from, you know, a common theme of tonight as we're talking about how people are getting more adventurous with flavor and more open to trying new things. And I think high ester rums will continue to flourish as long as that market carries on, you know, because it's a fascinating thing to try a 1,000 ester rum or a 1,500 ester rum, you know. The number of esters means nothing essentially, because the scale we use only measures one type of ester, ethyl acetate, so it doesn't really tell us about the range of flavors. It's like saying to someone, what kind of music do you like? Oh, I like loud music. What type? Don't care, as long as it's loud, don't mind, you know. And that's kind of what we're saying when we talk about high esters. But like high esters, low esters, whatever does it for you, whatever gets you excited, you know, you drink it. And the key with all of these things, with whether it's gin, whether it's rum, whether it's Umeshu, whatever we're drinking, it's like having that variety of going, actually, for these friends, for this occasion, I'm going to have something a little lighter, a little easier. I'm going to have this. Actually, you like drinking this? Okay, well, cool. You're more of a whiskey drinker. I'm going to give you this one. You're more of a gin drinker. Okay, try this one instead. You know, having a range gives you so much to play with. And that's where rum, I would say, kicks ass against all spirit categories. I'm going to dig this in right at the end because rum has so many different bridges into everything. We can give you something if you're a whiskey drinker, if you're a gin drinker, tequila drinker. I've got some crazy agricoles and clarins, you know, even, you know, dare I say it, even if there was a vodka drinker, I could find a rum that would convert them into the rum world, you know. So that is one of rum's strengths, is it has this diversity of flavor.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you so much for that. And I don't know, you said some controversial things, but because we don't have a lot of time, I'm not going to argue with you. I would like to pass it over to Ken, though. What are your thoughts on high ester rums?
Sure, yeah, and I think Mitch covered that really well. So I think one thing just to add with this is that the way everybody tastes is actually different. So how we perceive flavors, how Josh, you taste something will be different from how I taste it. I mean, our brand ambassador used to do this thing where he'd hand out in a seminar these bitterness taste strips. These are small chemical strips which you put the paper under your tongue and you wait. And so you'll get, out of a group of say 50 people, you'll get 3 or 4 or 5 that will immediately notice the taste of bitterness. Okay, very strong bitterness. Some other people, another group of say 10, might after 3 or 4 seconds they notice the bitterness. So then some people 60 seconds later will notice the bitterness, and some people won't notice it at all. It will just taste like a piece of paper. So this is one thing which just goes to show that the way we all taste is different. Some people absolutely have a pining for ultra bitter coffee. Other people despise it; they can't drink it. So I think this is one thing with esters is that for some people it delivers what their taste buds need, and for other people it will drive them off completely. So I think that it really is down to the individual and what their personal and what their biological tastes are like. As to what interests them. So, because you can have somebody will have a bottle and they'll be saying that this is a gift from God, how great this is, and yet somebody else will try it and it's despicable for them. It's something that turns them off completely. So I think that applies very much to this. I think going back to the French overseas, it's one of the things which makes that really interesting is the level of esters. That drives this multi-levelness in the rum. Other than that, it's not something that we think about a lot. We're not looking to drive and create the octomore of rums in that respect. We're just what drives us is we're trying to make rums which we personally love. If other people like them as well, that's great. But our primary goal is to make things that we enjoy ourselves.
Right. Yeah, and in the end, isn't that the most important thing, right? You want to, you run a business and making money is a very important thing, but there's something to be said about creating a product that you can fully stand behind because you're selling something that you love. You've created something you love and you want to share it with people. And I think that in and of itself is a special thing. So we've hit the 1.5 hour mark. We've reached the end of the event. Thank you all so much. Tal, I realize it's 5 a.m. in the morning. You have your Guinness poured already, which is lovely. Ken, it's 4 for you, and it's 3 for the rest of the crew in the UK. Thank you all so much for staying up. I know it's a bit of a commitment, but we really appreciate it, and we appreciate your insight and the answers that you've given. Just really quickly for those that are still on, a lot of people have dropped out because we kind of hit that end spot. But for those that are still on, Wednesday, May 5th, we'll be focusing on world malt whiskey, and actually we'll have Tal back. So we'll be talking about, you're going to love that. Bring a big glass of Guinness this time, a big glass of Guinness. We'll also be discussing Penderyn and Golden Perilous and Matsui, Japanese single malt. Then on Wednesday, May 19, we'll be focusing on whiskeys from Japan or Japanese whiskeys, brands such as Kurioshi, Oishi, Fukano, Totori, etc. And then finally, on Wednesday, June 2nd, we'll be focusing on independent bottlers, single malts of Scotland, single cask nation, and some other treats. Aaron, Mike, Gilo, thank you all so much for coming on and for your questions. Mike, you were the quietest one in the bunch, but we'll let it slide.
It's Aaron. He talks over everybody. He takes all my good questions.
Thanks, you guys. This was really great.
Much fun. Thank you. Oh, and by the way, everything really, really delicious. My mouth is just, I don't even know where to start. There's so much going on. Between the umeshu, the rum,
flavors,
the gin, it's good fun. I like it.
Good.
It was like an omakase in the mail. It's fantastic.
That's lovely. Well, everybody, thank you all again. Have a wonderful evening/morning. Hamish, it was good to have you for the second part of it. Your connection stayed on, and so it's nice to hear a bit more about your gins.
Thanks, Joshua. Sorry about that, everybody. It's got to be Scotland for you.
Yeah, well, we'll blame Scotland. That's okay. All right. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.